But let's dive into the background a little bit. So this band, I learned just this week, is made up of two gentlemen. One guy is called Mark Almond. He's the singer and the lyricist. And the other guy is called Dave Ball. He plays the keyboards and does all the drum programming. These two, I never knew this was a duo. So, of course I'm familiar with the Big Hit, but it's only two fellas. They are thought of as pioneers of this genre called electropop. So whatever that means to you, from Human League on through to Stereo Lab and beyond, I
All the way
suppose.
up to Nagelbet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They met up. They are both from a city in England called Leeds. It's in the north part of England, and it's maybe about an hour and change drive away from Manchester, so kind of in the far north. And they met up at school at a place called Leeds Polytechnic. At the time, this guy Mark Almond was a performance arts major, and this fella Dave Ball had a makeshift studio on campus. And after a chance meeting, Mark Almond was working on a performance art piece that he needed score music for, and he asked Dave Ball to help him work on some of that music. And from there, they pretty much started writing songs and recording demos, and that became Soft Cell pretty early on. This is about 1978.
Is it any indication of what that performance artist piece was? Like, did he just like not pee for 5 days and you like get to see him do a little pee dance while he's like trying not to wet himself? Is that what we're talking about?
I assume, because that was the anecdote I heard, was that one of his pieces was the standing naked or stripping naked on stage and smearing himself with cat food. That was
Who goes to those shows? I want to meet the people that are like, no, this is my bag. I go to random performance artist shows. This is a man who just screams in a mirror for 45 minutes.
Yeah, and then pees in his own mouth.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not so much who goes, because I feel like I could see myself going to that, but who is really committed to the fact that that is art with a capital A? That's the person I want to talk to.
Hmm. Actually, you know what? I don't know if I actually want to talk to that person. I want to like maybe observe that person like they're in a zoo or something.
Right. And we need a team of therapists to observe them and go deep on the psyche of that individual. So, unsurprisingly, perhaps from what's on the tape, Dave's idea of pop music at that time was very bleepy, minimal songs. He was writing about Tupperware parties, he said, and very mundane things, and inspired by bands like Kraftwerk, who were already out in the musical sphere. And Mark basically heard some of those pieces, those demos from Dave, and said, "Hey, can I sing some?" And Dave was like, "Well, yeah, you got a better voice than me, so let's form a band." Hence, Soft Cell is founded. So they bounce around. They're at college for a little while. They write a bunch of songs together. We're gonna get into that later. Their first EP was self-funded, and they printed about 2,000 copies of it. It was paid for by Dave Ball's mother, and attempted to distribute them themselves as a kind of demo to try to get recording contract interest, right?
Yeah,
And they
I,
were
I
playing
had read
live.
that. I had read that she gave them, 2,000 pounds, and they recorded it on a 2-track tape machine. Seems like kind of a lot of money.
Yeah. How much of that went towards like cocaine and
Yeah,
ketchup to
speed.
smear on
Yeah,
your naked body?
right.
There had to be some drugs involved somewhere. So, but they were playing around Leeds, the city of Leeds, and putting on these big shows. Because again, Mark's a performance artist, right? Performance is the main thing for him. And a guy called Steve-O sees them. This is pre-Jackass Steve-O. This is a British Steve-O
Right.
from
The
another
original
era.
Steve-O. Yeah.
Right. And he's impressed by their show, and he offers them. He is associated with this record label called Some Bizarre Records, and they're putting together a compilation album. And so he offers Soft Cell to put a song of theirs on a compilation album, and that kind of is what kicks off their career. At the same time, Steve-O says, "Hey, actually, I'm also going to be your manager." So this is an interesting grift, I think, to just go around to young people's shows. We're probably at the age where we should start getting into this. We should just sign people over to management contracts that they can't get out of and exploit them. So the song makes the compilation, and out of that, they get a bigger record deal with a record company called Phonogram, right? And so they released a single. called Memorabilia, and it didn't chart at all, unfortunately. It had kind of their first semi-major label distribution, but it failed to chart. The label was ready to drop them at that point, but Steve-O went in on their behalf, and he persuaded them to release one more single. And despite having hundreds of songs to choose from that they had written, they agreed that a cover song would be best. Enter now.
They were right, by the way.
They were right.
Yeah, they were right.
They were definitely right.
Yeah.
So that leads us to, as we've already alluded to and played a clip of, the story of Tainted Love. So Mark knew this song from the Northern Soul DJ clubs in the north of England, and he loved the song. And first I should offer a little backstory on what that all means. So Northern Soul was this movement, this scene in the UK, where at the same time that US clubs were starting to move on into disco and kind of leave Motown behind, UK clubs and the audiences there still really loved Motown era records. And there was this thirst in those northern clubs for new tracks, not just the same old singles that they had all heard before. And it led DJs to go on deeper and deeper dives. So Tainted Love, the original Tainted Love, was released as a B-side in 1965 by a woman called Gloria Jones. And in fact, its A-side was a flop. So really, the single didn't go too far. Tainted Love was the B-side of that original single. The single didn't sell that much. It was not a known quantity, except on these deep dive DJs and at these club nights that they would play. Now, you might recognize the name Gloria Jones because she was the woman who would later become romantically involved with Mark Bolan of T-Rex, and actually was driving the car in the car crash that ultimately killed Mark Bolan later on in the 70s.
So I can blame two things on her: the popularity of Soft Cell and having to listen to this album, and Mark Bolan's death. Okay.
I think this is a good moment, because I don't know if a lot of people have heard this, because it wasn't a huge success and the Soft Cell version definitely eclipsed this version. But let's play a clip of the 1965 version of Tainted Love. So basically, this song had come out some years back, but it was more or less lost to time, except these DJs. Now, I heard two competing stories about how it actually got into the hands of a UK DJ. One seems much more plausible than the other, but I'll leave it to you to decide. One was the fact that a UK DJ was just at a record store in America, in Philly, in fact, and happened to find it and bring it back. Another story that I heard repeated a couple times was that a US sailor, for some reason, had this 45 on him when they docked in UK, and he wanted to buy a pack of cigarettes when he got there, and he didn't have any cash, British cash on him, and he paid with a 45. However it happened, it became a UK club hit in the 70s, and guys like Mark Allman and Dave Ball, who were going to these clubs in the north of England, in Leeds, were familiar with it, right? And they also loved that it was associated with Mark Bolan, even kind of distantly. And so that's kind of how they zoned in on it. Now, I should mention that because the song was picking up a little heat, even this small amount of heat in this relatively small region of the world, Gloria Jones even went back and re-recorded it with Mark Bolan as the producer in 1976. And so we're not going to play a clip of that one, but we'll put it on the playlist. Listen to all three of these tracks in a row. It's like a walk through the musical decades, because it really is a very similar arrangement, but it really has a lot of cliches from the 60s, then the 70s, then the 80s in each successive version.
I was kind of shocked by how it's all there pre the Soft Cell version of it. Even the bump hits, everything.
Oh, right. Yeah. There's not a lot of liberties taken with the Soft Cell version.
There was what if we can't sing very well and we do it with synth instead?
It's so funny, Tom. I totally agree with that. And it's particularly the part you just mentioned, the bump. No, what is it? It's the part where I've got to run away.
Yeah.
That's kind of, it's implied in the 1965 version, which I had heard before, but it is strongly emphasized in the 1970s version. So, in other words, having heard that original 1965 version and then hearing Tainted Love, I was like, oh, they added that. That's cool. But no, they did not.
They didn't. I
wonder
which one. Well, then I wonder which one they heard. I wonder if they followed both versions and then made their own, or if they only heard the 70s one.
In the interviews, they talked about the 1965 one consistently, but
Okay.
this next one came out in 1976. They're thinking about recording it in 1980. I feel like there's a pretty good chance, and they knew it was connected to Mark Bolan. They would have listened to both versions, I can almost guarantee. But the one that was really a hit in the DJ clubs was the 60s version.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so July 17th, 1981, they released Tainted Love, the single. Tainted Love reaches number 1. It sells something like 1.3 million copies. It becomes the biggest selling single of 1981. Crazy success compared to what they could have dreamed of. And speaking of numbers, that leads us to our favorite segment here, By the Numbers. So first number I want to throw out to you guys is the number 6. As in the countries this Tainted Love single went number 1 in. That's UK, Australia, Belgium, West Germany, South Africa, Canada. It made the top 5 in another 8 countries: Ireland, Spain, Sweden, Netherlands, Austria, France, New Zealand, Switzerland. Now take note that none of those is the US, where as far as I can tell, the song is also ubiquitous. So, but it only ever reached number 8, unfortunately. But that gives you a sense of the reach of this track.
I wonder who had publishing rights on it.
Well, I'm about to tell you that.
Okay.
I will say that
Yeah.
my wife does not know or listen to music at all. And I was like, oh, well, this is the album with Tainted Love on it. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I played it. She's like, oh, yeah, okay. I know this song. Like, everybody knows this song. If you've gone to any 80s parties in college, like we did back when, the 80s were a cool throwback thing, this was played all the time. This is the song that I feel like, if you're trying to get shorthand for 80s in a movie, if I was making a shitty movie and I was like, hey, well, how do I make people understand it's the 80s? It's like this, or like Blue Monday, maybe would be the other one that would just be shorthand for 80s. It's that powerful.
It's very high up in the echelon of 80s songs. And I feel like we've referenced that concept that you just mentioned, Tom, a lot in regards to the 60s and the 70s. Like, how do you place someone in a decade within 5 seconds in a film? So yeah, I totally agree. This would work for the 80s. It's extremely successful. Okay, next number I want to throw out to you guys is the number 200. That's the number of songs or song ideas that Soft Cell had heading into the studio for Nonstop Erotic Cabaret. Lucky for us, they whittled it down to only 10.
They just picked the cream. There's,
yeah, right on the top. Right.
I'm a fan, and we've talked about it. I think we've talked about it on the podcast, but certainly Tom and I have talked about it in terms of our own writing and recording projects, that volume sometimes does win the day. Because if you just want better quality material, making more of it is not a terrible strategy. If you're able to make more of it and then take only the best, then theoretically the quality should just keep going up and up. If you can successfully edit out the bad stuff, but I'm not
and in
sure.
theory, communism works, Rob.
Yeah, right.
So these were the best 10 ideas they had, or really 9 ideas, since Tainted Love is a cover, as we mentioned. Next number I want to throw out to you guys. I know listeners have been dying for this. 43. That's the number of times sex dwarf is said during the song Sex Dwarf.
Jeez.
I know listeners miss us counting up the lyrical peccadillos in these songs. It's quite a lot. And the last number I want to throw out to y'all is millions, or at least a hell of a lot. That's the amount of money that Soft Cell missed out by putting yet another cover on the B side of Tainted Love. So they have Tainted Love, a cover on the A side. It sells all these copies. If they had just put one of their songs on the B side that they wrote, they would be in line to make lots and lots of money. But no, they put an old Motown song on the B side called Where Did Our Love Go? So they basically made almost no money off the Tainted Love single.
They had 200 songs. And like 200. That's ridiculous.
I mean, I'm not saying that Where Did Our Love Go helped Tainted Love sell, but if I'm looking at a single and it's Tainted Love, and the other side is Sex Dwarf. I might be like, I don't know if I'm buying this one.
Oh, I don't know. That would help me with the purchase, but it was a blunder of a financial decision.